Oh my god. Okay. That monarchist action account is already pissing me off.
We have really problematic monarchists.
Oy vey, goy. We have to you can't blame us for the death of your lord that we think is burning in hell and shit. Oy
Even
vey.
though it's literally in the Bible, like they are to blame. It's in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this first exhibit, let's talk about this first one from John Key. Monarchy is less of a real action driven ideology, and more of a collection of old ideas held by different people for a variety of reasons. It sounds like he's trying to make the argument that it's not even a system, it's just something that just happens sometimes and it's old, which doesn't even make sense to me. Maybe you guys can make sense of it to me.
From my point of view, he's saying a lot of things that don't mean anything.
Yeah.
So having read this is just schizo babble to me. Like, what does he mean by action driven ideology? And also, he needs to really elaborate on more of a collection of old ideas held by different people for a variety of reasons. What reasons? What collection of old ideas define different people? I'm being Mr. Semantics right now, but that's because this statement is so absolutely retarded.
I'll,
The
I'll,
fuck does all this mean?
I'll be as generous as I can. It sounds like he's saying like monarchy is just something that happens when people aren't really thinking too much about it. There just happens to be a leader who rises up and his son takes over when he dies. It just happens that way, but it's not really a system or an ideology. That's the most generous I can be with this. But even that's still
And
absolutely retarded.
Yep.
Now, here's what makes it so retarded. We're talking about kings. He's making the argument that kings come into being. They just accident into existence.
That
Kings,
never happened
K
in our
I N G
history.
S, just poof into existence somehow. No one ever actually like tries to make kings happen, like an apple falling from a tree. It just happens. I can't wrap my head around how retarded that is. You ever
I
encounter
mean,
something that's just so stupid you don't even know how to articulate a counter to it? I'm kind of running.
That happens a lot on my streams. Yes.
Yeah, I'm running into that problem. Like, how do I explain this in a way that even the stupidest of stupids can grasp it?
This guy probably has the intelligence of the average black person in America.
or he's on the low IQ part of autism.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, he's a monarchist.
you're being generous with that term.
I mean, he
You know what? I
talks.
think I could.
Go ahead.
I think I can be a bit more charitable, and this could be just complete nonsense. But I wouldn't be surprised if he typed that out, thinking of something completely different, and he just had no idea how to articulate what he was saying. But even then, that still begs the question: what the heck is he saying?
I mean,
A whole lot of nothing.
if I had to take a guess, he's thinking of monarchy like in the storybooks with King Arthur, of someone just rises up, that kind of thing. That's the only thing I can think of.
Which does sometimes happen, but even then, to say they just rise up ignores the how. Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Anyone
that's
can just
no. He's not
put
saying
them.
he's not relating that to an Arthur like situation. He's saying like it's just a collection of old ideas held by different people for a variety of reasons. Like he's literally saying it just accidents its way into existence. No one rises up. It's just you kind of look back on it in hindsight and you're like, oh, that's what monarchy is. But no one really
Well,
knows it's happening while it's happening.
Does this guy not know what cause and effect is? I think he doesn't.
I mean, if we can use his words, the same thing for democracy, since it's an even older collection of ideas. But yeah, his words, if you can switch them out for anything with everything else, it's a lot of nothing.
But as someone who like as someone who advocates for monarchy, which he does, that is true. How can you arrive at this completely asinine conclusion?
If we have to be generous, we have to go with artist's reasoning of maybe he was thinking of something else and couldn't word it correctly.
Maybe, but he's
Well,
said this before on my Twitter to me.
oh, so this is nothing new then.
Yeah.
This isn't just a comment that he threw out to try to express an idea. This is a point he's consistently tried to make.
So
Okay,
he
then
believes it.
I guess we could just label him stupid and move on.
You move on to the next two retards.
Yeah, I mean it's technically 3 at minimum. Yeah. So radical monarchist movement, I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that's more than one person. It's some kind of a group. Same with Monarchist Action and certainly with Monarchists of America. So these are entire groups who are openly egalitarian. Monarchy is the most hierarchical system. Okay, like before anyone says like, but fascism. Okay, Hitler still had a parliament. Okay, I think Mussolini did too. Okay,
They all do.
Yeah.
fascism is not like it. It is a dictatorship, sure, but just like with communism, it's a unofficial dictatorship. You're still technically, officially supposed to share power a little bit. Monarchy is intentionally one person has all the power. Intentionally, officially, however you want to say it, whatever synonym you want to use, one person. You got the captain, you have his crew, and then the passengers. That's monarchy. You don't get less egalitarian than that. So how do you make sense of this with these people?
I think they just want to suck Israel's cock. That's what I gauged from reading these posts. What purpose does that have? Why as a monarchist are you trying to suck the cock of, well, that place? Or that government, I should say. A democracy.
They want the shekels.
Yeah, that does make sense. It does go back to greed, doesn't it?
Well, let's try. I mean, it's difficult, but let's try to find a reason for their line of thinking outside of the small hats.
Alrighty.
I mean, it would be easier if we had
Ooh.
other posts to look at.
I noticed something in that last line from Radical Monarchist Movement. Admit it, you hate Jews more than you love monarchy. Like, what the fuck kind of, like, you're making monarchy sound like it's a religion. No, it's not a religion. It's an ideology. Like, what the
And it's
fuck kind of message is that?
and it's not inherently about hating Jews either. That's a whole nother viewpoint that just I've noticed happens to be related to a lot of other monarchists I know.
Like myself, huh? Anyways, and then yet you're willfully blind to the evils of a terrorist spouting regime that ousted a monarchy. Oh my goodness.
They're
I don't
referring to the United
think
States, aren't they?
No,
no,
I
Iran. Iran.
yeah, they're talking about their what is it? King in exile.
Yeah, they're talking about the Shah.
Yeah,
Oh,
but the Shah is very pro-democracy.
Yeah, funnily enough, maybe maybe that was a cause of his downfall too.
A lot of kings in the
But
last century or two, that's how they fell. They became egalitarian. And look where we are now.
yep. Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're going to be generous uh, with, I guess, their movements, they're probably considering more of a constitutional monarchy instead of absolute.
Hmm. Oh, another bit of an observation I made. That whole post from RMM? It sounds like what a Protestant person would tell someone like me. They'd say that exact line. That especially that final line. They'd say that exact fucking line. But it's like they don't know. They don't even care to understand why I feel the way that I do. Spoiler alert, it's actually because of Christ. Also, I don't think. How much money are you guys willing to bet that RMM knows nothing about Iranian history at around that time?
Oh, I sure don't. So they wouldn't be the only ones.
I learned not to bet money.
Smart, smart. But I'm willing to bet some good money that this guy knows nothing about Iran in the 1970s. Coming from somebody who had family who lived through that time, who got out of the country early before shit popped off. Yeah, that's how I learned. That's how I learned about it.
The radical monarchist movement. I've actually met with them. Their leader, I think, is a furry, bisexual,
Oh
and then I don't
wow.
know. Yeah,
Oh wow. Oh
and they have a
wow.
furry profile picture. They might be bisexual, and then the monarchists. Actually, I don't know anything about them. They're
Another one of
larpers.
those another one of those moments where it's like you just say one
Oh.
sentence and everything makes sense.
And
I guess
also, I
Yeah.
think like they're also I've read their rules. They're anti-racist, and I think they even put anti-homophobia or whatever.
So they're
Yeah,
just
they're
leftists.
gay. Yeah, they're pretty liberal, but they're LARPers. Like they believe in monarchy. They're like liberal monarchists.
There's no such
Okay,
thing.
okay.
So they're just
Yeah, that's
royal
a contradiction.
fanboys. Like
I guess they like the aesthetics of it more, but
yes, monarchy is a
why? I mean,
system.
it's not an aesthetic. Like you said, it's a
It's
system.
it's LARPers. Like I said, they're LARPers.
You know what's funny about this? I just I remember that one comment that Archaeosophy brought up and read out, where they were making the argument that you know you guys would be against a monarchy if it was like say a leftist, a liberal, or I'm paraphrasing, but what's so funny is I don't know. I just think it's funny that we had that kind of comment, and now we're dealing with groups of people who have those beliefs, and they're just completely antithetical to something they claim to be for. Really, it's hard to see not to see this as anything other than, well, I guess some of us do this to a degree as LARPing. The LARPing is monarchist, right? As has been said, they like perhaps they like some ideas, they like the superficial parts of it, like the concept of a leader wearing a crown, telling people what to do, medieval guards, just am I making sense at all, or am I just retreading
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah, you're making sense. It's just they clearly haven't thought any of this through.
Which, if they had, they'd realize that being a monarchist is one of the furthest right positions you can have if you're, actually a
Yeah,
monarchist.
but I mean, probably most of them are probably a little more conservative, but also very liberal. Like probably a lot of them are MAGA people. They probably just don't get it. Like they don't research.
So Bennett, in other words, understand the things you say on Twitter.
So the question remains now, what do we do as actual monarchists? What do we do about these LARPers? And
Yeah,
mind you, by the way, some people, and Bennett, I think you can confirm this from firsthand experience. I know I can. I've run across at least one of these guys' profiles, his individual profile, but I think you're actually part of MOA, right?
yes, I got
Yeah.
invited there by, well, now he's a communist, but it
Yeah.
was that Frederick, like the leader. His name is Saxon Dixie, I believe. He's actually pretty good on a lot of issues, but I think he's kind of like he seems to spend a lot more energy attacking like the far right rather than critiquing MAGA or the left in general. I don't think he has as much power over a server because he lets a lot of these trannies. He's against like a lot of degeneracy, which I actually appreciate, but he does let like I spoke with a tranny who was like pro-Muslim
Okay,
in
dude,
the
dude.
Discord.
What?
Bennett,
Um,
you gotta
yes,
learn brevity. Okay, so the point
what's
is
gravity?
how to make your point as soon as possible instead of just going on and on and on.
Yes.
You
But
ever hear of an elevator pitch?
so the point is there are actual communists in monarchists of
Oh yes.
America in these organizations.
What?
They're not just egalitarians. They are like full left-wing somehow monarchist types like running these things. So what do we do
Yep.
about them?
Rip and
I don't want to
tear.
make it sound like I'm like suggesting violence. Okay, for the fucking record, I'm not saying that. But
Oh, I was gonna go with the rip and tear joke.
well, you already made that in a previous video. People would find that repetitive.
I think we treat this like, with Christians. I think like, you have a large amount of people who obviously will not be on all the issues. I think you just need to create like the main points, right? The main things, the core values, and if people aren't compatible with those core values, then we can't accept them. I think the three main ones, of course, would be something like Christianity. You gotta accept that this country should be a Christian nation, or at least have those Christian moral values. The second one would be you have to accept, kind of a nationalist tone. Like you can't just accept that, every race is equal, or it's fine if we're completely replaced. And then the third one, of course, is you got to be a monarchist. I think these are the three values, or at least you got to believe in hierarchy. I don't think monarchy is enough just because it's one thing. Same thing with all the other ideas. You can't unite over one thing because there's no practicality in there. It's not going to last. Like, I'll give you an example, Moa. Yeah, Mel's a perfect example. Do you think they're really going to make change if they accept transgenders? Same thing with monarchist, or the other one, radical monarchist
It's
movement.
self-defeating. You can't side with the enemy. You can't bring the enemy into your camp in order to defeat the enemy. That's not how reality works.
I agree.
Yep.
You can't bring in communists because, like, well, we can't do anything without them.
Yeah, I heavily disagree. I don't know if this is going to be a movement that will last long. They come off too much like they're trying to be moderate.
You mean the group? I mean, movements are
Yeah,
different than groups.
and oh yes, yeah, sorry. And also I think it's disorganized, like, and I like a lot of the people, Noah, like out of personality. I guess that's the right way of saying it. There's some good personality, there. The problem is just there's not good organization. It's like I don't know if they vote, but they to pick their leader, they could kick someone out as leader in it. So the guy in charge, a lot of the people in Mo don't really agree on like a lot of cultural issues. So he could leave, and like if another guy gets in power and he's like weak on a lot of cultural issues, then that could really set Mo towards a more liberal path, which I would disagree with. So I just don't think this organization really could work. But I think there's good personalities. There's like a lot of decent people that I like talking with, but I definitely think there's a lot of critique, and they should centralize more. They should really stand stronger with the values.
There aren't different versions of monarchy. There's just one type. One rules all. It doesn't leave room for figureheads. It doesn't leave room for constitutions. It doesn't leave room for voting. Democracy, like then it's a democracy. It's one rules all. Period. That's it. No room for anything else in there.
Yeah, because a constitutional monarchy, just look at how Britain is. The king isn't a king, he's an advisor to the prime minister.
Yeah.
So a cuckold.
Yeah. Pretty much.
I'm gonna be honest,
Yeah.
I didn't know about any of these people until this evening, and I can see why.
Are you in
I
disbelief?
can't imagine
Yeah.
Heck,
It
I
is
am.
funny that
a
they.
little bit. Well, here's the funny thing: I could probably rationalize what they may be thinking to get them to where they got there, but even then, I'd only be trying to put myself in their heads. Their whatever they'd be thinking still would be nonsensical to me. So, for example, the which group is it that is explicitly communist again? I could maybe make the argument that they've come to a similar conclusion that other communist movements had, where they realized that communism, or at least how they ended up practicing it, could only be maintained by having some sort of hierarchy there to enforce it.
Which communism has already had every time anyway. So
Well,
what?
exactly, because it because of just how nonsensical it is on its face. The whole, hey, we're not going to have a hierarchy. We're just all going to get along, and all that nonsense. That's what I mean, though. Again, I'm trying to imagine what it is that these people are thinking that got them to this process. Like, are they just communism who like monarchy and think a bit of communism uh, could support it their way, or are they more so communist and do they just see monarchy as a means to achieve communist ends? In any case, it's still nonsensical, but that doesn't change the fact that they're clearly trying to do something with it.
I mean, they blocked me, RMM there, blocked me like a year ago. Like, they didn't even give me a chance, really. I mean, not that I care. They're egalitarians. They can go fuck themselves. But, like, they blocked me like a year ago. They just have no tolerance for actual right-wing beliefs. And yet they call themselves not just monarchists, but radical monarchists.
I mean, in a way, they're radical.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. The leader is a bisexual Christian. I just pray that this man understands that that's not compatible with Christianity. Wish
really
him the
isn't.
best. Yeah, it's what's funny is radical monarchist movement actually brought me to here today. That's the irony. I think they were the first group to reach me out. They said, "Hey, we like your videos. We want you to like join us." And I was like, "You know what? This monarchy thing will work out." So it's a lot of these moderate people that radicalized me, like Matt Walsh. This is like 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago. Matt Walsh, monarchist movement, radical monarchist movement. What's the name? um, yeah, it seems like a teenager wrote that. By the way, I don't know. Like, do we need to put radical monarchist movement? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a bit redundant as seeing as how radical it is in this day and age to even be a monarchist. So you'd only
Yeah.
be preaching to the choir.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
I suppose you could kind of tell they're immature just from their name. But then they're so sensitive. They're so fragile toward actual right wing views. So what do we do? Like should we try to debate these people? Like what should we do?
I mean, one idea I had is if we see their posts and if we're not blocked and we know that, I guess, the post is wrong, we could always chime in, kind of like a monarchist community note, and set the record straight.
Yeah, but they're very trigger happy with that block button. And like I said, RMM blocked me like a year ago. They have no they have very thin skin, like Razor Fist. Very thin skin, cannot tolerate opposing views for a second.
Okay, if we want to be childish, I can say we can just shit on them every chance we get them.
I actually had the idea for the opposite approach. I personally think we should leave them be and let them implode on themselves. They're already operating on being unified under completely contradictory beliefs. That is not bound to last. So while they're, spiraling to their inevitable demise, not to spook you or anything, we can just continue building ourselves up. Kind of like we're already trying to do in the wake of the upcoming collapse of the West. If that approach can work for however many years from now when the West does collapse and we have a means to provide for ourselves and each other, I don't see how that strategy can't also apply, just on Zitter.
But at the same time,
hey,
I don't know if they're inclined, which they are, if they're so inclined to block us because they just can't handle hearing opposing views like typical leftists, we still got to do something though, because I don't want these people representing us. That's my problem. You guys, like, these people are not monarchists. They're
Quality matters.
I'll be charitable and say they're fanboys of royalty, but they're not monarchists.
Quality of like spokespeople matters. Like there's a reason why a lot of people on like our side of the political aisle, we're so critical of a lot of the mainstream right wing voices, so to speak. They're not the best people if you think about it. I'm trying to think of a good name to utilize here. Yeah, like that Scott Presner guy. Like how the fuck is that guy? Like I don't know. That guy's a fucking mess. I'll tell you that much.
Maybe this all comes
Doesn't
down
help that
to
he's gay.
yeah. Maybe this all comes down to the fact that people are just scared of being actual right wing.
monarchist light.
They want, again, I'll be charitable to these communists, but maybe they actually want a solution of some kind and they think monarchy, but they still operate in the frame of mind of like, but what if something goes bad? What if the king's a meanie? Can we vote him out? Like they're too scared to commit.
Usually that does seem to be the case. Every time anyone argues with me over it, they always use that, well, what if he's a tyrant?
To which the answer is
Yeah.
always, how is that any different than any other system where tyrants have proven to rise up regardless of monarchy?
Yep.
Democracy brought in Hitler. I would keep throwing that at people whenever they're scared of a king being a tyrant. Like, democracy gave us Hitler.
And historically, monarchy had a
Yeah.
chance of stopping Hitler. But the guy who was in charge of Weimar said, no, I swore an oath to the, I guess, German Constitution. I cannot do that.
Yeah, the German Empire was destroyed, and because of the German Empire collapsing, it brought in degeneracy, it brought in poverty, and it brought in radical ideas, and it brought in fascism to become very popular. And I don't believe, I think none of us are like the leftist perspective on it, where it's fascism is always evil. Like we can see it's the nuance there, but there is a lot to critique of fascism, which rose because they killed off the king. Same thing with Austria-Hungary. They killed off the kings. It led to these other groups to take in power, and they failed their nations. And we could see the effects going on today.
I think we should also just generally address that question of like, what do you do when someone becomes a dictator? The answer is the same across the board, regardless of the system. One, the plebs aren't going to do anything anyway. And two, what's anyone going to do? It seems
That's
like
some
the elites just either put up with it or they try to take them out. But it's the elites that you kind of depend on to do something, right? No matter what the system is. And no matter what the system is, you can still get tyrants in the first place. So this
Yeah.
argument of like,
Yep.
I don't want a king because he could be a tyrant, always counter that with a tyrant can arise from any system. And again, democracy gave us Hitler.
I mean, look at the US right now, or even when Biden was president. People are getting unhappy, but there's no one leading the charge. So everyone's just going to sit there, complain, and do nothing.
I
Because
also
what
think
usually happens is when somebody tries to take charge, they're gonna get assassinated. I mean, look at JFK as an example. That's the most. That's like the biggest example I could think of.
A lot of politicians are being assassinated recently.
Yep.
And they tried to take out Trump.
Hmm.
yep.
the thing that I'm having to learn the hard way. Since I'm not very active on any where I'm at on the internet. Really, I like keeping to myself. I do talk about it quite a bit with some members of my immediate family, and the conclusion that I've had to come to is, although there are some valid criticisms of monarchy, most of the go-to ones are not unique to monarchy. Most of them, like maybe a handful, like so. There's one specific example that got brought up to me recently. There's a story in the Book of Mormon about a king who none of his sons wanted to take the reins from him to become the next king because they all wanted to be missionaries instead. So that left this king, King Uzziah, with a crisis. Okay, who do I get to succeed me? So he came up with a system that which would be called, you know, which would later be referred to as the reign of the judges to take his place. I'm sure you guys could probably guess how long that lasted. But the point is, that is a that is sure enough a unique problem to monarchy, what you do when none of the heirs want to take the throne. But you get valid criticisms like that are just buried in all these other criticisms that, for example, as you said, arguably Hitler came up through a democracy. What do we do when we get a bad person in charge? What are the people going to do about it? And arguably, I don't know if you remember, but we actually talked about this, you and I, a while back,
Yeah.
about about God's plan, that kind of people that tend to be around with the leaders in power. And didn't we more or less come to the conclusion that people end up getting the leaders they deserve?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing that's I realized is just talked about the least. No one really seems to consider, what if we deserve this? What if the people we, complain about and worry about getting the power to abuse their power, what if that is just the response to the decadence of the people themselves, to us, the whole world right now? Our politicians, our leaders, our quote unquote rulers are a result of the world we live in, perpetrated by we the people.
I mean, that's literally in the Bible. God tells us that directly. You always get the leaders you deserve anyway. And I think it's in Isaiah. There's a verse where Isaiah writes, like, my people are ruled by women and children. And he's like implying that that's God's punishment. Like, yeah, there you go.
I remember that one. And so it's something like women rule my people, and it also has something to do with bastard children too. So it's very related to the single mother epidemic that's also going on in the Western world.
Everything oddly makes
So
enough sense now.
the point I was trying to get to, though, and I apologize, I was a bit too long-winded trying to get here, is when people bring up what do we do about bad leaders, we should, instead of trying to get them to understand something that most people aren't going to understand, we should respond with, what do we do about a corrupted people? If we can understand that that is where these corrupted leaders come from, a corrupted people, because that's the real problem. If we can all agree already that corrupt leaders come from a corrupt people, how do we deal with the corrupt people problem? I think that should be emphasized more than anything else. It's have any of you guys ever seen V for Vendetta?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yes, familiar.
Basically, that concept where you have the scene where it's V, on the screens, and he basically just blames the people outright for the rise of their current government. And for the most part, that's true. And that's something people also I've realized don't understand since we talk about counter elites rising up against elites. Yeah, and how do you get a righteous counter elite to come out from among the people to combat a wicked elite when there's no righteous people?
That's a good question.
Not to sound black pilled or anything, but when what was it? An angel couldn't find enough righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah. God just said, "All right,
Couldn't
you
find
all die."
one. They were asked to find 10. They couldn't even find one.
Yeah, so God just said, "All right, you all die." Not saying that's what we should try to do, but
No. Actually, Ben, you asked a question. Well, you didn't ask a question. You tried making a point earlier, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting what you were trying to say. But monarchy shouldn't be our only goal. Is that correct? There should be other core principles that should serve as the foundation for our movement as well. Do I understand you correctly?
Agreed.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
we're
And
all Christians here
the kings
too.
would agree with me. All the kings believed in almost the same stuff. Wilhelm, he critiqued it. Same thing with Tsar Nicholas. They were all considered racist. So it's like all these people are basically very conservative, with exception to maybe like the kings in England. But if you look at like 1500, I mean, they all were like this. So it's like, well, maybe they concluded something right, and that's why history depicts them as a bunch of racists and evil colonizers, and all they do is bad because they're part of that. They link him up with Hitler because they did similar actions. There was a point I wanted to get to. I want to know, how do we even define bad? Because there's a famous example. Have you ever heard of Ivan the Terrible? He was a terrible leader, but somehow he was awesome because when you look at his actions, he expanded the Russian territory. He brought the military to greater strength. He objectively made Russia better than it was before. Yes, he killed thousands of people, but many of them were also really terrible people. And, I won't justify everything, but Ivan the Terrible for 1400 did a lot of pretty good things for the country
But we should
in the long
acknowledge
term.
malice and incompetence and not necessarily, claim those as
Yeah,
the same thing, but recognize they're both different types of
yeah.
bad.
Peter, he sent like 100,000 peasants, said, "Hey, make me this great city." They do it, and he did it in a very authoritarian and inhumane way. But look at the children; they're gonna live a happier life. I mean, that's kind of why I see as the long-term plans, and I think it could have been done in better ways. But when you look at what Peter did, Peter the Great, I mean, in the long term, he made Russia way greater. It's kind of like something Nick brought up too. If you look at the long term of the colonization, I mean, it objectively became better, under like European rule. And yes, there was a lot of bad stuff that still occurred, but if you look at the long term, things became better. It objectively changed for the good, especially America. If we just decided not to colonize because we wanted to be humane, it probably would still be bad. A bunch of native tribes killing each other.
I mean, democracy always exists on borrowed time. We were not successful because of democracy. We were successful in spite of democracy.
Yep.
We broke
Just like
off
Spin
from
said.
the greatest empire that's ever existed, and 200 years later, we've fallen off a cliff, and we're still falling. Like, Trump
Technically,
is
we're
just a band-aid, if anything.
and technically we're only successful because the U.S. keeps stealing other countries' like genius scientists and bringing them to America, like they did with Germany after World War II.
Yeah, I don't think it's really up to us, and by us I mean most people, including most elites. I don't think it's really up to us to decide if a leader is good or not, and whether they should be deposed or not. Because every leader is still human. Every leader is going to be a combination of good and bad. And
There's always nuance.
I think no matter what the system is, if a leader is bad enough that they have to be taken out, someone's going to try. I mean, someone's going to try anyway, because that's just what comes with the position. Democracy or monarchy doesn't matter. If a leader's bad
Either
enough
way,
and we can't take it anymore, someone's going to try, and then someone else is going to try, and then someone else is going to try. So no matter what system you have, you can always get a tyrant, and there's still a way to get rid of them if you really, really need to.
yeah, that's the thing with I think it can be attributed to a lot of things in life. You can't please everyone. You're always going to make someone unhappy.
So I just remembered. I was looking over the clip where we refuted Razor Fist monarchies brought about communism point, and and proceeded to poke fun at them. I remember saying after a while of just poking fun, I didn't think we had any more to say on the matter. But the thing this comment brought up, and I'll go ahead and pull it up on my end actually, just so I can read what it is that he was saying.
Wait, did Razorfist respond?
No,
No.
this is a commenter, and the comment goes
Yeah.
like this:
Real
Did you
genius.
did you guys forget the part where he explained that the entirety of the Book of Kings is God telling the Israelites why monarchies suck? Now, when I saw the comment a few days ago, going to go over the entirety of First and Second Kings just to try to understand what that point was, since I did remember vaguely seeing Razorfist bring some verses up across my timeline. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of time for that, so I kind of just skimmed through. So I've definitely missed a few things. I'm more than willing to go back to see if I get this wrong. So, by all means, if I'm incorrect about this, correct me if I'm wrong. But weren't the Israelites ruled by literally God Himself during this time? Or at least during a time, like after they were led out of Egypt and they set
Yeah,
up their camp in the wilderness and you had them being protected by the pillar of fire in the center? Didn't God Himself rule over the Israelites during some time period?
yeah. There's a verse. I get people throw this verse at me all the time. It's somewhere in First Samuel, where God Himself lays out to the Israelites, like, all right, you guys want a king, I'll give you a king, but here's a giant list of reasons of why that king will be bad. And people think that verse is God saying, like, this is why monarchy itself is bad. When it's
It's saying
right
that
there in the
specific thing.
text, it's right there in the text. If the people would just read it, that verse is talking about you're going to have bad leadership, one, because he's not me, and two, because you don't have enough faith in me. So this is punishment, if anything. It's not a
Well,
statement
that's
about monarchy.
Well, all it really comes down to is they didn't want to be ruled by God anymore. And so he laid out what the alternatives would be, what would happen if they didn't want to be ruled by literally God, the best ruler you could have. Here's how it would go. And, well, we can read in the Bible what happened after that.
Yep.
So if anything, if there's anything those verses say, it's less about the structure of governance and more about how close the people in said government, and as we elaborated earlier, the people themselves, how close they are to God. I'm sorry, to me that reads more of a, oh, you don't want to be near God anymore, and he hears his word and wisdom or be under his rule. So, well, here's the alternative, and it's just objectively worse, no matter which way you spin it, no matter how it's structured or organized, as long as it is not centered on God, on Jesus Christ, his Son, and the Father, it is doomed to fail, as it always has.
Yeah, and it relates.
Right, that's just something I want to point out.
Yeah, and it relates to the argument people make, or not an argument, but what people say when they say, "I will never bow to a king." Like us monarchists, I'm arguably the staunchest monarchist I even know, but I've never even come close to making the argument that you should worship the king. No, he's still a person. You'll never hear me say otherwise. He's still a person, but people think, I mean, in a sense, people think that that's what we mean. Someone to worship. No, he's still a person. The best leadership you'll ever have is submitting yourself to God. That's the best leadership you'll ever have. Okay, he's your leader. He's the leader of your people. That's it. He's not a god. He's not anything more special than that. He's just the guy in charge. Okay, you shouldn't worship him any more than you worship the manager at your store, the store you work at. Okay.
And
it's nothing more.
Well, real quick. This is really funny. I'm not like, you know me, I'm definitely not like a leftist, and the leftists do this all the time too with Obama. But MAGA will say like, oh, you worship a king, but do they not idealize Donald Trump? If you look at the MAGA movement, it's compromised too much of people who are either paid or completely have like this emotional connection to Donald Trump. They'll buy the Bitcoin and not care about Trump scam them, which probably, I don't know if Trump did that, probably some jackasses from his administration.
You know what's hilarious about that? About all of this? Like, I've been posting today about like Steven Crowder and his whole crew gushing over Trump, calling him daddy and shit. You know what's funny about like the hardcore MAGA types? What's so funny about it? They love democracy, but they're so horny for a king. And on top of that is the fact that we're monarchists here. We want a king, and we're very open about that. We don't worship Trump, not even close. And we're the ones who actually want a king, openly. We're not afraid to criticize Trump. We don't treat him as a king. And yet these
Trump
people,
monarchy.
And yet these people who worship democracy worship Trump as a king.
And they call themselves Christians.
Yeah, and to tie in on that with the whole we don't bow to a king, there's also when they keep saying Christ is king, it's like, are you not going to bow to him then? It's like 1 and 1 isn't making 3 here. And I think historically, no king wanted to be worshipped because they found it weird and I think disrespectful to the faith they followed.
Yeah.
And the ones that did not last long, since they were, corrupt leaders anyway, and were dealt with accordingly.
They were dealt with fast.
I like what happened to Hirohito the most, because the Emperor of Japan was always treated as like a literal god. I think they believe, even to this day, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they believe that the emperor is descended from divinity.
Yes.
Like that entire lineage is literally divine. But Hirohito got his ass kicked in World War II. And General MacArthur Actually, like, there's a picture of him standing next to Hirohito, and Hirohito's like really
Yep.
short. But he definitely got taken down a peg, and I just love that. Like, yeah, we're staunch monarchists here, and we're also staunchly against worshiping the king. Okay, no, he's just a guy.
Yes.
Although the
He is
Japanese Empire was
just a
kind of
guy.
cool. The emperor shouldn't be worshipped. That's like that's kind of stupid. But it's mostly because Japan's not Christian. There's a little divide there.
I was gonna make an edgy joke about the Japanese Empire, but I
They were
refrained.
based. Hey, listen, Japanese Empire were based. I don't care what anyone says.
You know, Scurvy, you can just say things, and if I think it's too much, I can just cut it out.
Alrighty.
You're way too
Everyone, go
cautious.
full.
For
Go
someone
full
who goes
course.
bananas, you're way too cautious.
It's the
That is fair, but
He
then
doesn't want
again,
to slip on the peel. He doesn't want to slip on the
yes,
banana
I don't.
peel.
I don't want to slip on the banana peel.
Just go full out. Throw your bananas everywhere. Get messy.
Well, I believe. Do you know who the Shiro Ishi are? So the Shiro Ishi, they were the Japs that were doing all the plundering and raping in China.
Unit 731.
Yep, Unit 731,
Oh,
baby.
that's the one. Those people were the ones behind that.
Yes.
Yeah, I've
Yes.
definitely heard of that place.
The Japanese emperor, with how he's viewed by the Japanese, I mean, it was something MacArthur himself was fascinated with because he viewed himself highly in a similar way. And I think there's even some, I wouldn't say reports, but letters and such, where he'd go to the emperor and say, "How did you convince them all to believe, you're the, God on earth and everything?" He was that kind of an arrogant person.
I see.
And I don't think the emperor ever gave him an answer. I think the emperor was kind of like, "It just worked."
It's just what we do.
Like Bethesda, they just say it just works.
Yeah, the older I get, the more I see just how sheepish the sheep really are, and it's kind of depressing.
I mean, yeah, if people believe in something, that will be enforced. But the thing is, when it's no longer enforced and believed in, then you kind of get the rebellions and the illegitimacy of a government. For example, if this is what people have been doing already, if people just completely distrust everything the government says and all the media, then they're gonna disregard things like police or the law. That's just how it goes, and that's why they're really scared. That's why
Only,
the FBI arrests radicals,
only
because
if
those
they're
those
desperate.
radicals.
It never truly goes anywhere unless people are desperate, like they're starving or whatnot. We're not
I mean,
desperate yet.
True.
And I think
you can look,
I don't want that to happen, but I think it's just inevitable. I don't want like starvation, but I think it's
well,
inevitable that
obviously you
the
don't
country will
want that.
collapse.
But I think I figured
Agreed.
out why the plebs never rise up on their own. It's always elites versus elites, just always.
It's just
And
they're playing a
that's,
chess game. Everyone's a pawn.
I think
Everyone's just
the,
like,
dude,
how do you play checkers?
dude, let me talk. I think the
Oh,
reason
sorry.
I think the reason is leadership. It's really obvious when I say that, and felt obvious when I realized it. But the plebs can't get anything done on a large scale without leadership, and if no one's leading them, like, unless they get lucky, and it's like, there's a pleb who, like, he just somehow possesses all the smarts and all the experience, unlikely, and he decides to lead them, but that's still like one guy. If he gets taken out, then the movement's over. But point is, like, it's leadership. The very
He also
reason,
becomes an elite by definition.
yeah, the very
He
reason
stops
that
being a
it's
pleb when he
always
starts having. Sorry.
the very reason it's always elites versus elites is because just by the nature of being elites, that's a form of leadership, and plebs don't really have that. The sheep don't really have that. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that any who do, just to highlight your point, they stop being plebs.
I mean, you have a point because that's what most people do. Everyone waits for the one person to stand up and, I guess, lead the cause, so to speak. But a commoner or a pleb, a peasant, can't do that because they don't have the means like an elite does. They can't pay for things that need to be paid. They can't, do anything because they don't have anyone who's going to listen to them. They don't have the money to enforce it and no resources to work with.
Sad,
I mean, I don't
but also maybe good.
I don't agree with revolutions anyway, as we all know, but just something I realized, like, oh, that's why it never happens. It's not really because plebs are just that stupid or that lazy. I mean, most of them are, but that's not the reason. It's because it's kind of hard to get strong leaders from amongst the lead.
Well, not to mention, what's one person with no resources going to do against the established elite who have all the resources and can just
all
kick
of
you to
them.
the side?
One of the reasons, I wish I lived in a right wing system, a right wing society, is because we could just be ourselves. We could be as tribal as we want, and it's not illegal to speak in tribal terms, like, fuck these people. Like, the English and the Scottish have shit on each other for centuries. They still do, but like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, you can just be who you are, because that's who you are. You can be yourselves. But when you're egalitarians, when you're all egalitarians, it brings everything down. And here's how it brings everything down. When I was a kid, I went to this I think it was a field trip of some kind, and we played this game out there. One of the games we played was, this guy made, he took this long, it's kind of like similar to a tent pole rod, like, where it like breaks apart if you just pull it apart a little bit. There's a rope in the middle, but he made, it was like a whole circle of that. So it was like a metal bar, but it was circular. If that made any sense. Probably didn't. Sorry. Anyway, the point is, everyone stands in a circle, and we hold this bar on our hands. We hold our hands under it. The goal, what we're trying to do, is lower the bar without anyone losing contact with it. So everyone has to be touching it at all times, and all you have to do is lower it to the ground. But what ended up happening is, we keep raising it. It's kind of a psychological experiment more than it is a game. But the reason we kept raising it instead of lowering it is because that's what we had to do for no one to let go ever. Like, we kept over compromising, almost letting go of it and losing. And democracy, or just egalitarianism in general, works exactly that way, except it's the reverse. Everything gets brought down for that reason, because you're constantly trying to compromise with everybody who come from different places in life, trying to make everybody happy at all times, no matter what, brings everything down. So it's like a reverse of that game. But when you're yourselves, like, let's say you're playing that game by yourself, you could easily do it. You could easily lower it to the ground without letting go. But the more diversity, if you will, that you bring into the picture, it gets worse for that reason, because you keep compromising. That's why.
But diversity is our strength, though.
No, it's quite literally our greatest.
Shut the hell up,
It's
Scurvy.
quite literally our greatest weakness.
Well, yeah, I know that much.
So basically, what you're saying is, like, what they, I guess, did in schools. I think when you and I were back in school, where it's that whole premise of no one left behind,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, people at the top have to get pushed down, so there's no, I guess, favoritism or special people. Everyone is stuck being the same generic equal robot.
Yeah. And I just thought of another metaphor as you were talking, actually. Like, imagine, like, in terms of like evolution, and for some reason, this is a whole other debate that I don't want to get into, but I do accept the theory of evolution as a Christian. Whole other subject, let's not get into it.
Boo.
But take wolves, for example. Like, do you think a wolf could get into, as adapted as it is to survive against its, like, the cold, hunting down prey, just everything it needs to do, could it do that if it was trying to appeal to everything in its habitat? Like, oh, I shouldn't kill this rabbit because that wouldn't be nice. So now you're a little hungrier. Oh, I shouldn't go after this beaver because that wouldn't be nice. Okay, now you're even hungrier. Just, you see what? Like, that's compromise in real time. The more you compromise, the more it detracts from not just you, but everybody. When you're all trying to make each other happy,
No one's happy.
yeah, it's a form of starvation in every way, not just
That's
food. Just in every way. In every way. Starves everything.
That's actually something that's pissing me off that I've observed within, my own church. Not to, I mean, I know I'm bringing it back to my own faith. You will find people who ascribe to pretty much every political and ideological philosophy within the church that I'm a part of. Part of that is why, and admittedly, it's more prominent in Utah more than anywhere else, but it is still prominent in some areas. I think I even mentioned this on one of Bennett's streams. It's this obsession with the concept of niceness, and we think that's being Christ-like. If anything, it just it's that difference between being meek as Christ was and being weak. Like, yes, Christ was gentle and compassionate, but he didn't tolerate sin either. He didn't excuse it.
Get the
Yeah.
whip out.
Need we go? Yeah, need we go over what he did in the temple to the change trader?
Yeah, there's
Yep.
a
Yeah.
time and place for everything. Like, I love that picture. It's not really a picture, it's a drawing. The drawing of there's a warrior. He's like a Templar or something, but he's wearing full armor. Can't even see his face. And he's clearly just gotten out of a battle. He's all beaten up, scratched up. There's blood on him. But in this image, he's by himself, but he finds a cat. This cat walks up to him, and I guess he somehow has cat food in his hand. So let's just ignore the likelihood of that. But for some reason, he has cat food in his hand, and he just gently bends down and lets the cat eat it out of his hand. And the caption was something to the effect of, like, this guy's a warrior, but he's gentle enough to feed a cat. He doesn't only kill, is the message. And I think Christians ought to be the same way. Like, there's a time and place to be everything that we need to be. There's a time to be a warrior. There's a time to be gentle. There's even a time to be giving. We kind of think of giving now. Like, socialism has just fucked it up. Like, give away
Gives me.
anything that's socialist. But Christianity is
There's
so
a-
feminized now that it's like, no, only be generous at all times. Be nice at all times.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's not orthodox theology. There's a time and a place where you know where you can be like an asshole. Absolutely. Well, maybe
Have you
asshole might
ever?
be the wrong word, but
There's a
at least assertive.
I'm trying to remember. There's a Bible. I think it's like a chapter in one of the books. Have you ever read? It's like Turn. It's from the song Turn, 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 and it's based off. I think it's from Jeremiah or Ezekiel, somewhere in the Old Testament. If I
Okay.
remember correctly, and it was
Chances
a
are I
time for
probably haven't
war, a
read.
time for peace.
Oh, I
Time.
know. Yeah. I know that one.
Yep. You have a time of hate, a time of love. Um, I need to read the rest, but it encapsulates what we're talking about perfectly. You have
Yeah.
time for hardship, battle, and you have a time for meekness, calmness. I don't think calmness is a word, but time to be more gentle. You know, God tells us that. There's a time where we have to be like strong and stand by the faith. And then there's a time when, it's also like remember Peter and Martha, I think it's Martha or Mary, where Jesus is very calm with her, but he says to Peter, "You are Satan. Get away from me, Satan."
Yeah.
It's literally like
So,
that.
And if
how
you
many
just
of y'all actually know what the word meek means in the biblical context?
Mistranslation.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh.
exactly.
I wouldn't say Christ was meek. I would say he had humility.
Oh,
He
big
didn't.
time.
He didn't boast anything. He didn't. He didn't act I guess the best way to say it is he doesn't act like most Christians do today. He understood that he's one person. He can do what he can do, but at the same time, he's not going to be pushed around.
He's fully God, fully man. And to say that it's 50-50, that's actually a heresy in itself.
And does anyone remember what happened after they killed Jesus? The temple got destroyed. God
Yep.
split in two. People forget that. God showed his wrath. And what else happened afterwards? The Christians grew in numbers. They spread, while the Jews stayed being very bitter about it. And they write the Talmud, and they have this hatred of Christians, and they never get their own land again. They're basically just a what do you call it? Trans
Transitory.
people.
Transitory.
They don't have a country. They're transcontinental. They become a transcontinental people because of what they've done.
I think
I know you and I are actually long overdue for a debate, Okairo. Like, I don't know if you even remember we planned to have a debate, a theological debate. I don't know if you still want to do that. Frankly, I'm actually a lot less interested now. But one thing I will say, specifically to you, is that Christianity sure is it sure is successful if it's like for being false, for Jesus not being God. I don't know if you believe he even existed or not, but for not being God, at least, I just find it interesting how successful it's been for being completely based on lies. All I'm gonna say.
Well, I don't think it's based on lies. I think it's more of just how people work in terms of, I guess, martyrdom. Everyone likes a good martyr. But I don't think the Bible is lying. There's probably a lot of truth to it. It's just a matter of I wasn't there. There are some questions that probably don't get answered, and that's where faith comes in. I have nothing against Christianity. I think it's a very good religion. I just think it has a lot of crappy people in it.
But you
I
still
feel like
don't.
this is a new development, though. Like, Christianity is over 1,000 years old now, but when you look at what's going on now, it's more just they've been influenced in that wrong pathway. Like the Protestants got subverted, and but there's still many people that are based. And this actually reminds me of what happened. I'll be very quick here. Um, and what I was saying about there's a reason why Andrew Tate got really popular in 2021. In 2021, a bunch of kids, even my own cousin, was thinking about like joining Islam. And then something happened where Christianity completely took over Gen Z. And then now we see Gen Z rising back in Christianity. And that's mostly because you have a lot of people sticking up for the faith, and having this kind of bravery again. I think that's kind of what had happened. I don't really think it's I don't know if I subscribe with this idea where it's just people believing in it. I feel like it's too much like you're trying to create a rational explanation, but we don't really have any answers to most of anything in the world. I think this is its own rational explanation because it fills in most of the holes if Jesus really did die. And there's many scrolls. I'm trying to remember which one, but there's one that even talks about, yeah, like Jesus being able, many we have witnesses, and there's trying to remember which scroll, but it talks about how they found Jesus was the body was able to like have like this kind of weird way of disappearing. I need to go more in depth on that, but the body was gone, the body stayed, I think, but damn it, I need to like look at where it was from. I'll show you another time, but the point was they found something mystical with it. They found something they couldn't explain, and the only way to explain it was the fact that probably Jesus did rise. The book of
Um,
Shroud, I think, or the Shroud of Torah, I think it is called. Something with the Shroud.
to You didn't really ask a question, but say I'll say this is kind of an answer anyway.
Shroud
Yeah,
of Turin.
it does require faith, Okairo. That's in the Bible. It's also just simply logical. Like, yes, this requires faith. And it's actually not only is that like the best we can do anyway, but it's also, at least I think, kind of purposeful on God's part. How does how does he know, or how do we truly even know for ourselves who we are in relation to him without faith? If it was all facts, anyone can believe a fact, but it's a whole other subject when it comes to who you are as a person, who you choose to be as a person. Yeah, if it was all facts, and if it was easy to believe, well, first of all, what kind of life is that? But also, how would that shape who we really are? It wouldn't really. Anyone can
It can be.
believe a fact. But also, in regards to facts, I said this to monarchical autist, and I had a conversation weeks ago. It wasn't recorded or anything, and I wish it was. But I explained this to him, so it'll sound repetitive to him. But to the rest of you, think of mathematics, specifically pi. That number, the number pi, is both infinite and complete. Those two things sound contradictory. How can something be infinite, as in it literally goes on forever, does not have an end, but it's also complete? You may even know that as a fact, and it is a fact, but you can't wrap your head around it, can you? If you're honest, the answer is no, you can't. You still know it's true, though. So when it comes to like miracles, or even, Jesus being fully God, fully man, some of these Christian concepts don't make sense to us. That doesn't mean they're not true, though. Just like with pi being infinite and complete. Pi will never change. It's the same numbers all the way into infinity. Same numbers will never change. But it has two contradictory properties somehow. We know that's true, but we still can't wrap our head around it. So it's things like that make me go, is faith really all that bad? I mean, is it really too much to ask for? I don't think so. You're never going to understand everything. So why not? Why not have a little faith?
If I had to put this in words the best I could, it's I don't really have an issue with Christianity. It's like it's a good religion. I do believe in Jesus Christ and everything he's done. It's that concept of, I guess, God, the invisible guy in the sky. It's I guess it would be best to say that it's that one step that I have problems coming to terms with. I do believe there's a higher power, just I don't know, naming it feels wrong.
I mean, again, that just goes right back to faith. That's the best we can do. I mean, we have to call it something. We can't really even talk about it without calling it something. I mean, I don't want to stay on this forever, but
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to make these basic points.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to, I guess, make a point of, which is why as a Confucian, I don't see any issue with Christianity because, in a way, both kind of align in the same, I guess, morals, the same kind of workings. The only difference is one doesn't have a god and Christianity does.
Just to see if I understand Confucianism correctly. So basically, it's a understanding of how the world is in both its morals and its laws, without the acknowledgement of where they come from necessarily, or at least without any claim that they come from a higher power, but they are observable in the world. Do I understand that right?
Yes, for the most part, that is it. It's more of a pragmatic ethical system than it is a religion. There's no theology to it. That's the only real difference.
Okay, fascinating.